Thank you very much. I'm always embarrassed when someone introduces me, so my face turns a little red, but I'll calm down. Okay. All right, now we're talking about, what's the title of the topic again? I forgot. Anyway. Yeah, culture wars. I love it. I love culture wars. All right. Now, it's also about not being a fence sitter. Okay, so when I saw that, I saw the point in the instructions. I was given instructions like, Robert, touch on this, speak on that, mention this. And there's something about people who are fence sitters. Okay, they don't know exactly which position to take. I know there are a lot of people like that in the world. There are a lot of Catholics like that in the world. But this is not a new phenomenon. It happened in the ancient past. So we'll go back to the 9th century BC, and I've got the Bible here, and I'm opened up at 1 Kings chapter 18. And it's a story of Elijah and the priests of Baal. Now I notice there's a lot of Lebanese here. Okay, so this story is not going to favour you guys because the Baal worshippers were from Phoenicia, ancient Lebanon. All right, but there was a big problem in this period of history for the northern kingdom Israel. Now, if you know anything about ancient Israel history, the northern and the southern kingdoms split after the time of Solomon. Okay, so that was around the year 935 BC. And the northern kingdom was Israel, 10 tribes, and the southern kingdom was Judah, Judea, the Jews, and the tribe of Benjamin. Well, the northern kingdom began to slowly become infected from the north, from the Canaanites and Phoenicia, the Baal worshippers, okay, because the Baalic divinities were favoured because they were fertility gods. And if you're an agricultural society and you're wanting the rain and you're wanting your crops to grow and you're wanting fertile animals, you tended to drift towards worshipping these more visible gods that were represented in the statues of the time, etc., rather than this invisible Yahweh. Anyway, so Baal worship is slowly seeping into northern Israel, and to the point where the majority of the people have apostatized to these gods, the Baalic divinities. Unfortunately, one of the divinities were called Haddad, my surname, so it's not very flattering. He was the god of lightning and thunder. Okay, and associated with lightning and thunder with this Haddad divinity was, of course, rain, storms, okay? And Elijah was only one of the remnant who'd held out against Baalic worship. And he was very strong, very courageous. But he was up against very powerful forces, particularly the monarchy there in ancient Israel. Because the king Haddad, who was Israelite, made a fatal mistake. He married a Lebanese woman. He married Jezebel. Now, who's heard of Jezebel? Yeah, and put your hand up if Jezebel's associated with something good. You know, Jezebel, bad, right, bad. Well, Jezebel was Phoenician and a Baal worshipper, and she controlled Haddad. Which isn't surprising. If you're a Lebanese bloke married to a Lebanese woman, you know who has the power, all right? The Lebanese woman. And she controlled Haddad. And so they went on a war of religion to impose Baalic worship upon the Israelites. And Elijah stood firm. Elijah actually, Eliah means Yahweh is my God. So the name represented the vocation, the calling of Elijah. So I'll start here. I'm going to do a bit of reading. When Ahab, it's Ahab in this translation, saw Elijah, Ahab said to him, "Is it you troubler of Israel, you troublemaker Elijah? Why don't you go with the flow?" You're being told that today. Good Catholics who resist the cultural revolution we're in now, you're troublers. You're going to be illegal in Victoria very soon. Okay, you want to hold on to your Catholic faith like Elijah held on to Yahwism, the true religion of Israel at the time, going against the majority, going against the trend, you're going to be called a troublemaker. And he answered, I have not troubled Israel, but you have, and your father's house, that's the house of Omri, because you have forsaken the commandments of the Lord and followed the Baals. Now therefore send and gather all Israel to me at Mount Carmel. This is how courageous Elijah was. I'll give you the challenge. Meet me at Mount Carmel and send your priests of Baal there. And the 450 prophets of Baal and the 400 prophets of Asherah, another Baalic divinity, who eat at Jezebel's table. So Ahab sent to all the people of Israel and gathered the prophets together at Mount Carmel. And Elijah came near to all the people and said, how long will you go limping with two different opinions? That's how people today. There's a huge crowd watching. This is better than World Wrestling Federation. Okay? This is a great challenge. Elijah alone, with some supporters, up against the prophets, the priests of Baal. 850 there when you add the two categories together. All right? Who's going to win out? Which God is the true God? But the people were confused. The people had been corrupted. Okay? They'd fallen away from Yahweh. They've gone towards Baalic divinities. Our Catholic people today very much so have fallen away. They're gone with the flow of modern culture today. If they're challenged to go back to their Catholic faith, they would dither. They wouldn't know what to do. They wouldn't have the enthusiasm or the interest to go back to their Catholic faith. If the Lord is God, follow him. But if Baal, then follow him. Okay, now I'll stop reading and I'll paraphrase now. What happens next? Okay, so the challenge is they slaughtered two bulls, two separate piles. And Elijah said to the priests of Baal, you go first, call upon Baal and see if Baal will send down lightning from heaven to consume the bull. So the priests of Baal started, and they started singing, "O Baal, hear us! O Baal, hear us!" And it went on and on and on. And it went on for hours. "O Baal, hear us!" They began to be frustrated. There's no one hearing them. Nothing's coming down from heaven. Okay? And they started cutting into themselves. Okay? And they started jumping over the bull, the slaughtered bull. And Elijah's actually there, standing around, begins mocking them. Look, you need to pray louder. Maybe Baal's asleep. It actually says that here. Okay? Okay? He is asleep and must be awakened. Okay? So nothing happens after hours. And then it's Elijah's turn. What does Elijah do with his bull? He surrounds it with 12 stones to represent the 12 tribes of Israel. And he pours water, not once, not twice, but 3 times on his slaughtered bull. And then he simply says, "O Lord God of Israel, of Abraham, Isaac, and Israel, let it be known this day that thou art God in Israel, and that I am thy servant, and that I have done all these things at thy word." What happens next? The fire comes down from heaven immediately, consumes the bull, everything, licks up the bull, the water, the wood on which the bull was resting, the stones, everything is just consumed by the fire from heaven. What happens next? Well, the Israelites who are watching, the hordes that were watching, obviously they, the God of Israel is true, answered Elijah's prayer. And then Elijah ordered some of his supporters, grab the priests of Baal, take them down to the river Kishon and put them all to death. Rather savage. But many of you would have right now in your home a statue of Elijah with a sword like that. Put your hand up if you've seen that statue of Elijah with a sword like that. We've got it at home, okay? When our alarm isn't working, I'd say to my wife, look, our alarm is not working. Don't tell your friends this, guys, okay? Our alarm's not working at the moment. My wife says, don't worry about it. We've got a picture of Elijah in the house with him with the sword like this, okay? So they slaughtered all the priests of Baal because they were resisting this grace. And they were going to perpetuate the promotion of the Baalic worship in Israel. That's why they were put to death. Then Elijah goes up Mount Carmel. By the way, there's been a drought for 3.5 years. And this drought was imposed on Israel because of their apostasy. Because the Baalic divinities were supposed to be fertility gods who were promised the rain, but God was showing to Israel, these gods don't exist. They can deliver nothing. If you want the rain, you've got to turn back to Yahweh. So Elijah goes up Mount Carmel once, twice, up and down, then 7 times up and down. And then he looks to the west. Across the Mediterranean Sea, he sees a small cloud, the shape of a hand. It comes closer and closer and closer to Israel. And then it covers the whole sky and it pours rain. And the drought is ended. And then Elijah, Jezebel's furious when she gets the report, furious, and sends her soldiers to capture Elijah and have him put to death. And Elijah flees down to the Sinai, to the same mountain where Moses received the 10 Commandments. And he's there in hiding, but also in depression. That's why St. Elijah is one of the patron saints for those who suffer depression. And I'm not kidding there. When I went on my honeymoon to Israel, I think, oh great. And my wife has a great devotion to St. Elijah. We named our first child after St. Elijah. I had no say in that, by the way. That's it. Forget it. You know. Okay. You can choose me, Robert, but I'll choose everything else. All right. And when I were going to Mount Carmel, and I think, oh, fantastic! I can't wait to get to Mount Carmel. I really was excited. This ancient landscape, Old Testament, where the clash between Elijah and the priest of Baal took place. We get to Mount Carmel and say, where's this mountain? I can't see it. Unfortunately, today there's this huge 5-star hotel built on the site. It's lost its effect. It's lost its impact as an Old Testament site. They worship other Baals there now, unfortunately. Anyway, but what's this saying? These people were forced to get off the fence. These people who had doubts about their faith, who'd gone over to another religion or no religion whatsoever, is a foretaste, prefigures our own times today. There are many Baals today, and our Catholic people are in a similar state of spiritual decay as the people of God were in that time. And there needed to be Elijahs or prophets. This is the beginning of the age of the classical prophets, by the way. Elijah is the first of the classical prophets. They'll continue right through to Malachi in the 5th century. That's why when Christ is on Mount Tabor, and you should go there one day, should go to the Holy Land, the 5th Gospel, and he's on Mount Tabor and he transfigures, and we see his divinity shining through his humanity, and there's St. Peter, St. James and John witnessing this. Who appears with Christ? Moses and Elijah. Not Isaiah, not Jeremiah, not these other great prophets, not Ezekiel, not Daniel, but Elijah. And Jesus is conversing with both of them because Moses represents the law and Elijah represents the prophets. Moses was testifying that this Jesus of Nazareth is not a lawbreaker, and Elijah is testifying to the fact that Jesus is not blaspheming when he calls himself Son of God. Okay. Now, what's the state of the world today? I think it's never been worse, to be honest with you, and it's getting worse by the day. Having a conversation this morning about what's happening in Victoria. This will put me into jail in Victoria. If I'm teaching this and it's filmed and it gets shown in Victoria, if I go to Victoria again, I can be arrested for the following statement. In God's plan for life and love, sex is only meant to be between a man and a woman. In the context of a marriage that's freely entered into, that is exclusive to all others, that's permanent until death, and is naturally open to the possibility of life. That makes me a criminal under the government of Daniel Andrews. That will put me in jail for up to 10 years or a $200,000 fine. It'll probably be jail because I don't have that much money in the bank. Okay? So, that comment strikes at the core of every aspect of the sexual revolution that you guys are a victim of. And my generation was a victim of. Because the sexual revolution has been rampant since really after the First World War. Okay, not the 60s, before the 60s. But okay, we're in a period of the great revolt against God. St. Paul said, you know, when he was writing to the Thessalonians, the man of sin will appear. That's generally considered to be the Antichrist. But before, the revolt must come first. Now this revolt isn't, when I was 15, 16 years of age and I used to be influenced by Baptists and other Protestants, I thought the revolt was like the last 20 or 30 years before the coming of Christ. The revolt has been occurring for centuries. The revolt began in the end of the Middle Ages. It's been going now for 700 to 800 years. It's reaching a climactic period now. What are some of the calamities we face today? Secularism, to drive religion out of public life. Atheism and new atheism. Every generation, X, Y, Z, post-millennials are becoming increasingly more atheistic or agnostic every decade, I assure you. And the surveys tell us that most of these up-and-coming young atheists or agnostics are generally benign to religion per se, but I don't believe that will last. We're creating a vacuum, and it will be filled not just by a benign atheism or new atheism, but because the new atheism is not so benign, it's hostile, it's caustic, it's ridiculing, it is a spirit of persecution against religion. The sexual revolution I've already referred to, and it's just so ongoing. What has it brought in? The destruction of sacramental marriage, the fornication culture, the contraceptive culture, the abortion culture, the gay lesbian hegemony that we are now in, the transgenderism that we're now currently in. Do you think it's going to end with that? The next phase, if you look at that latest atrocity that comes out of Hollywood called Cuties, the next phase has begun with that movie. And I wasn't surprised. It's now advancing pedophilia. The premature sexualization of children and the accessibility of adults to those children. And then polyamory is just around the corner. Polygamy, polyamory. You know what polyamory is? Multiple loves. At the same time, or polygamy, I can marry more than one woman at the same time. But polyamory, I could marry 3 guys and 2 women at the same time. Why not? Whatever I want, I should have. And who cares about the will of God, because that God no longer exists because we've killed him off. Then you've got, and you still have some of the older problems we've had for 5 or 6 centuries. You know, the Protestant fundamentalism, the Enlightenment, which is really, if you hear about the Enlightenment, who studied the Enlightenment? Who's heard of the Enlightenment? The Enlightenment is a lie. The Enlightenment is Jesus Christ and the apostles and the church. I am the light of the world. The Enlightenment is really the endarkenment, because at its core is revolt against authentic philosophy. And that's the philosophy, and I say to him, I know I've got a good Dominican friend here to my left, Father Paul, but the authentic philosophy, the synthesis of faith and reason, is embodied in St. Thomas Aquinas, the school of moderate realism. If you don't know what that means, don't worry about it. Just think St. Thomas Aquinas, authentic philosophy. The Enlightenment is one series of attacks against that philosophical system, until we've got what we've got now, the deconstructionist postmodernism. What's deconstructionist postmodernism? Destroy everything, because everything is just a social construct. Like one year 10 girl said to me a few weeks ago, but isn't, you know, what you're saying about male and female and blah, blah, isn't that a social construct? I said, excuse me, but gender theory is a social construct. Okay? And she just, oh yeah, you're right, okay. Yeah, so before I lose track here, these philosophies of the Enlightenment had one project: to dismantle Thomism, St. Thomas Aquinas, and the Catholic faith. And it's working. They are well ahead of schedule. We've got basically the apostasy of the nations now. And we live in a world of lies. We're surrounded by lies. Lies propagated by the media, television, the news, current affairs, the music industry, the social media of Twitter, Instagram, YouTube, Facebook, except my YouTube channel. You can watch that one, that's okay. But I'm telling you, okay, I can be funny sometimes, but really, let's get back focused here. This is deadly serious. Hollywood is there in the United States on the West Coast, and it is the propagator of most of these evils. And its agenda is not just to entertain. Its agenda, with all the other media and social media, the general agenda is to corrupt. In the same way the priests of Baal did it in that century, in the 9th century and beforehand and afterwards. Baalic divinities, Baalic religion pervaded across the European basin. It wasn't dealt with until Rome destroyed Carthage. Okay, when I was growing up, I was supporting the Carthaginians because they were there. The Lebs planted them there. The Phoenicians planted Carthage. But that was an export to the West of that type of religion, which, by the way, involved at its core human sacrifice. The sacrifice of infants to the fertility gods. Because you had a child, that's fertility. You've got to thank the gods. You've got to show something in return. We have that now. It's called abortion. The great Fulton Sheen, Archbishop Fulton Sheen, he gave us certain signs when a society is under the dominion of the devil. 1, nudity, hence pornography. 2, abortion. Where there's abortion, it's really at its core human sacrifice. And that's what we have today in the world. Why is it now? Well, especially since the Obama administration, we see Satanism in the United States more and more public, more and more manifest, and Satanists no longer in the closet, but out publicly in the streets protesting and supporting pro-abortion movements and protests. Why? Why do they want this? Because they know at its core it's a human sacrifice. And where there's human sacrifice, that means the dominion of humanity by Lucifer. And this is destroying the Jesus revolution. The greatest revolution in history, the most successful revolution in history, was the Jesus revolution. Because what did it bring into the world? It brought in things like truth, humility, purity, fidelity. That's what it brought in. And it built a new world, slowly, over centuries. A new civilization. We called it Christendom. And it reached its peak in the High Middle Ages. We had the great saints, the great popes, the great doctors and fathers of the church. We had a world which was essentially, not perfectly, because we're imperfect as humans, but where the state and the church were in a union. Distinct, but in a union. So that the world would have its laws and its customs and its culture and its ambiences influenced by the teachings of Christ. And in the last 700 to 800 years, we've worked assiduously to destroy this world. And it's still ongoing. How are we responding as Catholics? Disastrously. We're falling for it. It's not just me. I'm not just going to engage in hyperbole. I'm privy to a lot of stats in my job. The Australian Bishops' Conference has official statisticians. Dr. Robert Dixon. In the United States, we've got the Georgetown University CARA Research Group, which publish stats on the state of the church in the United States every year. So I'm privy to reading those two stats every year. I'll give you some basics. In the United States, around the year 2014, 24% of Catholics in the United States were practicing their faith. That's now down to 20%. The amount of priests in the United States around the time of the Second Vatican Council closing was about 50,000. It's below 30,000 now. The number of nuns in the United States at the end of the Second Vatican Council was 180,000. That's down to around low 40,000s, average age over 70. In Australia, so when we look at all these stats in general, what's declining? Baptisms, mass attendance, confirmations, marriages. You're all, who's married here? One. The rest of you are looking to get married. Great, excellent. Right? If you want to marry, you're probably an exception for your generation. Most young people now of your age group are not married and don't want to get married, don't care about it. They're just shacking up. If they get committed, okay, that's their free choice. If they want to have children, that's their free choice. But that is the minority. Every generation, as I've said already, is becoming more and more secular, more and more atheist. There's a survey that came out in the United States called Going, Going, Gone. And it says the pivotal age is around 13 years of age. Same in Australia. At the moment, we're conducting the last phase of a meta-survey, the largest ever done of young Catholics ever in the world. Started in 2014, again in 2016, again in 2018, and now finished it off for 2020. There's a lot of PhDs that can come out of this data. We're surveying on average over 17,000 students, year 6 through to year 11. So 5, 7, 9, 11, those year groups. So we've tracked the year 5s, the year 7s from 2014 through to 2018. I'll give you this stat. In our Sydney Catholic schools, the number of students, the percentage of students in year 7 who either don't know whether God exists or don't believe in God is 13%. By the time that same cohort got to year 11 in 2018, it increased to 33%. 20% increase over 4 years. Why? Because are we meeting the challenges? These people are growing older, beginning to be confronted with adult questions, and are we giving them adult answers about God, the existence of God, proofs for the existence of God? Why is there evil in the world? We're losing them to the propaganda of the atheists and the new atheists in media and social media. What's really scary is disaffiliation rates in Australia at the moment. One of the most depressing meetings I ever attended was in Canberra, and I listened to this really very erudite Dr. Trudy Dantas, and she's just giving us the facts as it is. Disaffiliation rates, that is people are just abandoning the Catholic faith. Over 20,000 people a year in Australia just say, I'm no longer Catholic. Our practicing rates in Australia around the mid-50s were 55 to 60%. Maronites last year, the survey said, were 49%. Last time I remember 49% was a failure. But we're still pretty good compared to a stat. Listen to this stat. Now in Australia, about 10% of Catholics attend Mass regularly. You know what the definition of regular is? Once a month. Once a month is regular. 10% of Catholics in this country, and that includes Maronites, by the way, is only 10%, plus or minus. It's been in relentless decline since our own surveys, ABS surveys, you know, the census statistics, every 5 years since 1966. When we had the same-sex plebiscite in 2015, 66% of Catholics voted for same-sex marriage. 66% of its Catholics don't have a clue what marriage is. Sorry. That's offensive to some people. I can't help that. You have to speak the truth sometimes because we're not intending to be offensive. It's not God's plan that man marries man or woman marries woman. So if we work for centuries to destroy sacramental marriage between heterosexuals, now we're working very hard to erect some other type of marriage in inverted commas. From my perspective as someone who works in Sydney Catholic schools, I get contact with a lot of new teachers. I meet 300 new teachers every year at our beginning teacher retreats. And what I see lights of hope. You know, I can tell what uni they come out of. If they're really enthusiastic and they know stuff, I know what uni they came out of. If they know something, I can guess what uni they came out of. If they know nothing, I know what uni they came out of. And you notice I'm not mentioning names because I'd want to keep my job. Okay? But so many young Catholics coming out of schools, universities, they don't have a clue. They don't know their faith. They don't love their faith. And therefore they don't practice their faith. Then they get in front of classes and students. And what happens? They just infect the next generation with what they've got. No enthusiasm. No oomph. No love. Nothing. It's failure perpetuating failure. And this is what we have to reverse. We're not going to give up. By the way, this is not a call here to put the white flag up. This is the call here to be like Elijah in the 9th century BC. St. Paul refers to Elijah in his letter to the Corinthians. I forget which one, probably the second letter to the Corinthians. As a man, as a remnant who, with 7,000 others, did not bend their knee to Baal. And that's what we have to avoid. We must not bend our knee to Baal. Catholics used to be considered the people who were the leaven in society, to raise society up. We're not the leaven anymore, we've been levelled. We're like everyone else. No distinction anymore. We were the ones who used to abstain from meat on Fridays, go to Mass on Sundays, have large families, large number of kids. We're not distinct in those three ways at all anymore. How do we respond? How do you respond? Okay, well, you know, you might not think I'm a future Elijah. And, okay, that's all right. But what you are, each one of you, because of your baptism, because of your confirmation, because you received the Eucharist, you are anointed people. You are a Christian. You are, in a sense, here's a word, Christed. You're anointed. You're a little Christ. With that, you can do a lot. You have to believe in yourself. Stay humble. Don't be proud. Don't think, yeah, I'm the next Elijah walking the earth. You know, just listen to me. We've got too many false prophets. But you can be true prophets where you are. Little people, weak people, we all are. But you've been called. You've been chosen. You can be sent and you can influence where you are. Some of you might have doubts. I had doubts about the Catholic faith for many years. You know, I went to a public school. I went to Punchbowl Boys about 3 or 4 years ago. That was the third worst school in the country. Okay? I came out of that because I had good Catholic catechists and I had influence from good Baptist friends. Right, who put some good seeds into me, even though they were gently anti-Catholic. But because of their influence on me, and later on at Sydney Law School through evangelical Anglicans, I had doubts about the Catholic faith for 6 years. From the age of 15 to 21. I just didn't know what to believe. I just thought Catholics are hopeless. They just get drunk. They swear all the time. They lie. They don't know their Bible. They're awful compared to the Protestants I knew. Bible-believing, faithful, prayerful, trying to live holiness. What's going on here? And yeah, do Catholics worship everyone except God the Father? Catholics worship Mary, worship statues, worship the Pope, worship bread. I heard all this. I had enormous doubts about my Catholic faith. Remember, I'll never forget the time I'm in year 11, 1980. I'm in the Inter-School Christian Fellowship lunchtime gathering. I opened the Bible and I opened it to Matthew. What is it? There's Matthew 12 and talks about the brothers and sisters of Jesus and names the brothers as Joseph, Jude, Simon, and Joseph, Jude, Simon, Joseph, Jude, Simon, I forget, and James. Very good, thank you very much. Okay, and I panicked. I thought, this is it. Catholic Church is wrong for sure. Catholic Church teaches Mary as a virgin, a perpetual virgin. Didn't have any other children except Jesus. Well, here are the other brothers named. What's going on? What's going on? Took me 10 years to find out the answer when I was writing my lessons for St Charles College, Year 7, 1990, and I worked it out that they were the cousins of Jesus, first cousins, children of Mary married to Clopas. Clopas was the brother of St Joseph. That's why Mary is called sister of Mary, mother of Jesus, because they're sisters-in-law. And I went, yeah, I discovered this, and I found out St Jerome said this in the 4th century. It's the truth, okay? But what I'm saying, if you've got doubts, I just guarantee you one thing. Even though you might not believe me when I say it, the Catholic Church has the answer to every question, the answer to every doubt. Theological, philosophical, cultural, moral, you name it, the Catholic Church has the answer and the right answer. I say that, I'm willing to go to my grave saying that. When I realised how true the Catholic faith was, and it hit me in February 1986, I just dropped out of law school for the second time because I had depression. I kept having depression. I couldn't face exams. It took me 4.5 years to finish final year. Okay? When I found out the truth about the Catholic faith through one book, reading one book, The Question Box by Father Conway, written in the 19th century, I found it at a friend's house. At 447 pages, I read it in 2 days, answered all my questions. I went explosive about the Catholic faith. Probably too explosive. I lost some charity or whatever. Okay? A lot of arguments, which will all prove fruitless. Now, you have the potential to do great things. You start with yourself. You reject, be courageous like Elijah and go against the flow of the mob. Don't bend your knees to today's modern Baals. And make a few own personal resolutions. After this retreat, what can I do more? What can I be more? Am I praying? Am I not praying? Then start praying. Am I not praying the rosary? Then start praying the rosary. Am I engaging in fasting and abstinence? Well, if you're not, we'll start a little bit of that. Check with the commandments and the Beatitudes. Am I faithful to those? Should I be practicing now better custody of the senses, what I'm watching, what I'm listening to? To fight the fight against pornography, immorality. Am I controlling my thoughts, what's in my heart? This is a lot of work. You can't do it by yourself. You need God's grace to do this. Am I missing on communion? Am I missing on Mass? We'll go to Mass at least once a week. Go to confession once a month. Trying to get to communion at least once a week. Am I having good friends? Are there some friends I need to ditch? Or not real friends because they're leading me down the wrong path. You're here today associating with other good people. You need that. You need to always have that. I cannot survive by myself. I would be gone as well in the modern world. Am I going to commit to some Catholic action? Serious action, like at the University of Sydney Catholic Chaplaincy, battle line. No, you don't have to do that, but are you going to commit to the church, social justice, charitable works, doing something in the parish, catechizing, being a catechist, whatever. There are thousands of things you can do there. Am I going to learn my faith so that I can provide answers to others who have doubts? A bit of old-fashioned apologetics or new apologetics, where you engage in knowing the truth in order to answer the deeper why questions for yourself and for others, doing it with gentleness and reverence. I think I've got 1 or 2 minutes, right? Okay. Now, I'll just read the last bit. It's not the best, but I like what's coming up. Okay. In this age of apostasy, and it is, I believe, we're in apostasy. That is a total abandonment of God. The apostasy of the nations and the peoples. Are you prepared to risk being a hero and to face the mockery and the ridicule that would come? Will you, like the ancient Elijah, be a troubler of the modern Israel, the church? You're up against the world. You're also up against many in the church who won't like who you have become and what you stand for and what you believe. If you stick to the Bible, if you stick to the catechism, if you stick to the dogmatic teachings of the church, you're a fundamentalist, Catholic fundamentalist. Look, I'm fun, you're mental. Okay? You say fundamentalist? That's what I said to someone once. They call me a fundamentalist. I stop there. I'll accept half of that. I'm fun, but I'm not mental, all right? Okay. So Elijah and those who followed him were warriors for their time. Are you willing to be that spiritual warrior who gets off the fence and makes a decision and ready to act on that decision? Every century has its heroes. And God raises those heroes, and God is not dead, God is not asleep. One thing is certain, in this age like every other age, God will raise up the future heroes of the 21st century. And the heroes of the 21st century have already been born. It's up to you if you want to be one of them. God bless. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Rob. Question time. Yes.
Hello, good morning. Thank you for the talk. I find that nowadays lots of people hide behind relativism to avoid conflict. So you'll have a discussion with a friend and then they'll end up by saying, let's agree to disagree. How can we, as Catholics, respond to this?
Well, I'm glad there's still some people who are willing to say that to some extent. Because when you say, I agree to disagree, or we agree to disagree, you're at least holding a position. Okay? And I'm presuming you would be holding a Catholic position. See, one thing we can't do in any religious dialogue or debate, we can't force people to accept the truth. We can't. I tried that sometimes, and it's just a waste of time, and you're not an effective instrument of God. You're really impeding the work of the Holy Spirit when you get a little bit aggro, lose your temper, be forcible, name calling, all that. You might think I've won the fight, but you really lost the soul. You lost the soul. And John Paul II once said to the Canadian bishops back in 1999 on an ad libitum visit that, apologetics and new apologetics is about winning souls, not winning battles. Okay? But the real problem today, deeper than what you've expressed. Well, one thing, you should be congratulated on at least witnessing to the truth you know to that person in that circumstance. And if you're gentle and reverent, they'll admire you for that, and you've planted a seed. You pray for them, let God do the rest. You'll be surprised who eventually who comes over. You've done something towards the long-term conversion of that person. The big problem today with postmodernism, which is the denial of truth. There is no truth. And even if there was truth, it's inaccessible. We can't know it because our senses and our intellect are unreliable. And that's the core of what's called postmodernism. Okay? And that's what strikes directly at St. Thomas Aquinas and his philosophical school, or so to speak, because St. Thomas said that the senses and the intellect are reliable. Of course, we're subject to original sin and the wound of ignorance, but we can know truth. There is an objective truth, and we can know it. We can know it through observing nature. We could also fill the gaps. God fills the gaps through revelation. So the modernist disease was that we only accept things that can be rationally tested. Okay, we reject anything known only through faith. That's modernism. Postmodernism goes one step further. We reject things on the basis of faith, but there is no objective truth to be known through our own senses and intellect, which are unreliable. I've met someone like this at Sydney University. I'll tell you the story. Back in 2006, I met this brilliant 19-year-old on campus. He said, I'm an alethic skeptic. Well, I didn't even know what it meant at the time. What was an elite? That is someone who doesn't believe there is truth. You can't know anything for certain, he said. Absolutely nothing. He said, what's 2 plus 2? It's 4, isn't it? And he said, no, you can't know anything with certainty. Really nice bloke. It's super intelligent, much more intelligent than me, and I thought, I don't know how to handle this guy. Okay. 3 years later, I'm walking from Redfern Station to Sydney University campus, and I see him again. He's coming out of the car with an old woman. And he's in his graduation gowns. He's graduating today. I said, what's happening? Oh, I'm graduating today. And I said, and who's this woman? He said, that's my mother. I said, how do you know that? And honestly, you should have seen the look on his face when I said that. Like, that's right, because common sense just destroyed his whole philosophical system, which was built on sand. All right, that is your mother. Go tell her you don't know that's your mum. Go tell her. Okay, all right, yeah. He knows it was his mum, and he knows it with certainty. Okay. And that's a true story without one word of exaggeration.
Hey Rob, good to see you again. Just a question, and I think a lot of us here are probably confused about this. It's about this, I don't know if you want to call it a culture or this movement that's happening within our Catholic faith. And sorry to bring this up, but like it's that whole Babel and angelic tongue sort of thing that we're experiencing. Can you just like share your opinion on that? What you think of that?
This is a phenomenon that's been within Christianity since at least the 2nd century AD. Okay, when we read the Acts of the Apostles, we have Pentecost and we have the descent of the Holy Spirit, and they break out in tongues. One thing you notice there is that everyone who's come, it's 9 o'clock in the morning. Okay, 3rd hour means 9 o'clock in the morning. And the people who are not part of the 120, they're looking through the windows and the doors, and they see Our Lady, the Apostles, and all these other people, moving and swinging and talking. But everyone who was listening could hear them speaking in their own language. So if I was an Egyptian, if I was a Roman, I was a Greek, or I was an Arabian, or whatever, I could understand them in my own language. Now, this is the gift of tongues. It's a charismatic gift given by the Holy Spirit. It doesn't make you holy, but it equips you to preach the gospel to the world. So this event was an unraveling of the Tower of Babel incident, where people were injected with multiple languages to divide humanity. Now God is giving through the Holy Spirit multiple languages to help you reunite humanity in the family of Christ, the church. Okay, but see, the critical thing for me there is that what was coming out of their mouths was intelligible. What we see now is a phenomenon. We saw this in the 2nd century AD with a Pentecostalist type Christians called Montanists in Asia Minor in the 2nd century, and one church father, Tertullian, joined them. Okay, they bring out you get this type of language or utterances coming out of people's mouths that are unintelligible. Now, the defenders of this phenomenon, called glossolia, say that it's actually the language of angels that St. Paul talks about in his first letter to the Corinthians. I think it's chapter 12 to that range, chapter 12 to 14, when he's discussing the various gifts that the Holy Spirit gives, etc. Chapter 13, St. Paul says the most important thing is faith, hope, and love, and the greatest of these is love, more than these charismatic gifts. Okay, so I'm conflicted here. I could also see there's room for the diabolical to insert itself here, that some of this babble is just that. It's not necessarily from the Holy Spirit. It could be induced or inserted by a diabolical spirit. It's like what was that phenomenon in the mid-90s, the Toronto blessing, people laughing hysterically on the ground, writhing and all forms of bodily shapes. That had to be diabolical. Someone said to me as a joke once, the strange thing, when I read the Gospels and Jesus touches people, he normally lifted them off the ground. In this phenomenon, people fall to the ground. It seems like a reversal. Look, more important than any of these gifts is faith, hope, and love. Okay? You see, knowledge must lead to love. If I'm, like St. Paul would look at me now and he'll apply the rule that he has in 1 Corinthians chapter 13, and he says, oh Robert, you're just a cymbal that's banging away and blah, 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 but do you have love? And if you don't, I'm looking for love of God above all things. You love your neighbour as yourself. He's looking for charity more than anything else. Sometimes there could be some pride here. I know I'm elect. I know I'm one of God's favourites because I've got these gifts. I can do miracles. I can raise the dead. I can talk in tongues. That doesn't get you to heaven. Okay? What gets you to heaven are whether you are loving. When Jesus is asked, Lord, what must I do to get to heaven? He doesn't give these answers, speaking in tongues and, prophesying and, raising the dead, Love God with all your mind, body, heart and soul. Love your neighbour as yourself. Okay, that's what he's looking for. That's more important. Trust me, there's no alternative answer. Okay.
Hello? Okay. So as Catholics, we're called to find like truth and lovingly share it to everyone we meet, right? So how do we balance that and like having the charity to share it with people? Say, I went to a public school as well. I have a lot of friends who aren't religious. How do I balance that with also the opinion like sometimes they're not really good for you? Like, how do you discern that sort of...
Who's not good for you? These
like,
friends?
Yeah, so let's say they're not particularly religious or open to religion, that sort of thing.
Well, we're entitled to have non-Catholic friends. You got to know, you know within yourself your vulnerabilities. You can maintain these friendships so long as you don't feel susceptible to their arguments or their lifestyle. Okay? If they want to tell you to keep coming, let's go to these strip joints, you can't, right? That's where you draw the line. Okay? Let's get drunk every Friday night. No, you got to draw the line. Okay? And if they don't want to change and it's obvious and they're trying to drag you down their road, you've got to sometimes cut, sadly. Okay? We've all probably cut some friends off in our lives or whatever. But like, just because you disagree, that doesn't mean you end the friendship. As long as you always engage with the rule that St. Peter gives us, always give an account for the hope that is in you, do it with gentleness and reverence. If you can always converse with gentleness and reverence, and that if you're a good model, good example, then you can somehow be an instrument of grace for them over time. At least get them to respect you and honour you for a person of integrity. Okay, that you're not one of those other Catholics that they know. I mean, I get it so many times, oh, you're a Catholic, you must support pedophiles. You must cover up, I got it last night, another email. You must, support the Pope who covers up for pedophiles. No, I don't actually. And they're surprised when they hear, oh, you're a Catholic and you don't support pedophiles. In fact, you support the victims, is that right? And you're trying to get this problem out of the church. Yeah, that's right. I'm not alone. There's millions of others, tens of millions, hundreds of millions of others who are likewise. And if you can, I know Protestants who get shocked when they come across a Catholic who doesn't swear, who come across a Catholic who doesn't gamble excessively, who come across a Catholic. I still have one bet a year, Melbourne Cup Day. It's harmless, all right, don't worry about it. Okay. And when they come across a Catholic who knows the Bible, they get shocked. I was at Hyde Park once, maybe about 5 years ago, and there were these young Protestant gentlemen. They had microphones and cameras, and they were just going around random asking people questions from the Bible. And they came up to me, they didn't know who I was, and they said, what was the name of the young fellow who fell asleep during St. Paul's homily and fell down and crashed to the ground? I said, Eutyches. And I was shocked. I shocked myself. How do I remember that? Because it's the name of another heretic, Eutyches. Anyone who doesn't listen to St. Paul properly falls down. That's how I remembered it. Okay, but if you can show these things, that you follow the Ten Commandments, you try to. You really do believe in Jesus Christ. You believe in God. You love Jesus Christ. You quote the Bible. You live a life of holiness. You attempt to. You need to show that to the other, so they can get these prejudiced positions or views about Catholics out of their mind. The media is never going to put forward publicly a good view about the Catholic Church, the Catholic faith, or Catholics in general. They're always going to report the scandal. So can you blame the other when they just know about scandal? Is it their fault necessarily? We have to break through that and give them an example of what a Catholic is meant to be.
Okay guys, we now have time for one more question because of time before Mass. Rob's going to be available after this question at the back, I believe. Maybe.
Oh, actually, I don't want to interfere with Mass. All right?
Outside, sorry.
Yeah,
so Rob's going to be moving outside after Robert's talk, but this is the last question. There are a lot of people who put their hands up, which is really good, so he will be around.
Thank you. I'm probably pretty similar to some of the other questions, but I've got this friend, and if I, strike upon a conversation that's like, I say something that's quite orthodox or, truthful. Anyway, like she's very much a part of the culture, and gets incredibly aggressive. Like if you say something about marriage or like, the LGBTQ thing. And it's just like incredible, like just attack dog sort of thing. And I just try and stay kind of calm. But it gets to the point where it's like she just gets incredibly like more and more aggressive, and then I just end up like just trying to drop and like wind the conversation back. And it's like, what's that point where it's like you can keep going, and what's the point where it's like how are you going to deal with that like aggressive mentality that is really present in our culture at the moment, especially with young people like that. If you say anything that doesn't like line up with the way I think or the culture thinks right now, you don't have a right to speak, sort of thing.
And that's where we're at. You've summed it up.
Yeah.
And I think her aggression may be in part due to the fact that she's defending her own lifestyle. She's not just defending an ideological position that she's assumed and supports. Somehow she's living out that lifestyle in one way or another. She's just another victim of the sexual revolution. You continue to engage her so long as there's any hope that she's willing to respect you as a person. I work in similar circles. Right? I've been ridiculed, I've been mocked, I've been abused, and sometimes I push back. And I remember one very famous incident, it was not 2017, and I just said to the person, listen, is that how you speak to other people? And that put her in her place quietly, because she was in a group, we were in a professional group, and the issue was about women priests, and she really went off in a rage. And I said, well, is that how you speak to other people, is it? And she was embarrassed by that. Remind people that you have a dignity too, and that you ought to be respected. And that if they're about tolerance, why aren't they consistent about their tolerance? There's an inconsistency here. But what I'm really afraid of most of all with your question is that it's emblematic about where the whole culture is leading. I am actually afraid that there is a generalised persecution slowly rising in the Western world. Right? And we see this again. Daniel Andrews is just one microcosm, one example of that gaining momentum. Like, okay, we're in New South Wales, so we're safe from Victoria. What happens if it spreads to New South Wales, Queensland? Oh, we can go back to Lebanon. Okay, well. That's why in 2010 I took up Lebanese citizenship, and my wife and all my kids escaped. It's my Argentina. So okay, but on the serious, I am worried. I am worried. If they did it before, if they did it with the Roman Empire, if they're doing it now in Islamic countries, 42 million martyrs in the 20th century alone of people who believed in Jesus Christ. If they did it during the French Revolution, okay, the anti-clericalism in France and in the German Empire, the Spanish Civil War, the Mexican Civil War, Communist China, Soviet Union, North Korea, Vietnam, and now Victoria, right? Okay, if they've done it before, they'll do it again. And that's what I'm really worried about. All right, on that positive note, we'll finish. Thank you.